Hello everybody, and we are going to talk about Katana Kami, A Way of the Samurai story today. I had absolutely no idea that this game was coming until it landed in the stores. I don't know why I'd missed the news, but Spike Chunsoft took it on, and Spike Chunsoft continues to prove that it is one of the publishers that I just love. Everything that this publisher actually comes out with at the moment is just gold, and Katana Kami really feels like a game that was made for me. As a big fan of Japanese kind of ghost stories and yokai and all of that kind of stuff, this is very much a game that's designed around that aesthetic and that tone and that kind of storytelling tradition, and it really delivers. Before I talk about all the good stuff, I will mention that it's not the perfect game. I find the controls to be just that little bit fiddly. It's not to the point that I can't get through the game. Obviously, I've played it through. I've got a review coming to digitallydownloaded.net, but it's not quite as precise as you might want, especially for kind of an action-based roguelike in which timing and parries and all that kind of stuff are pretty important. But I did get through it, and I was more than happy to, because the game's merits, all the stuff it does well, more than makes up for its minor faults. I think this is going to be one of my favourite games of the year. In fact, I think I'll remember it in a similar way to another very niche game based on Shinto kind of storytelling tradition, and that is Orishika, which was a PlayStation Vita release from quite a few years ago now. I have never let that game go out of my head, simply because it is very, very much in line with the kind of Japanese monster storytelling stuff of tradition that I've really enjoyed, and this game is very much in that same mold. So like I said, I think that this is going to be one that I remember for a long time, will come back for a long time to play, and we'll probably talk about more than once. So the first thing to quickly address is that this is not really a Way of the Samurai game. I know a lot of people would have come to it. Well, not a lot of people. I don't think there were that many fans for Way of the Samurai out there, but fans of that game who have been waiting for a new title in the series for quite a while may have picked this up based on that subtitle, and they may be disappointed with it, which is unfortunate, because if it had another name, if it was just called Katana Kami, like I think it should have been, then I would think that people would, play it on its merits and enjoy it for what it is. It is a action roguelike in which every time you go into the dungeons, you have a different layout and all that kind of stuff, and then between dungeon crawls you get to go back to town, sell swords and other bits and pieces. There's an overarching plot in which you need to basically pay off a huge debt for a sword maker. As a result of that huge debt, his daughter has actually been captured by a gang, and you need to pay them off. So it's like Tom Nook from Animal Crossing, but far more serious in terms of stakes. And if there is one element that comes across from the Way of Samurai series, it does have that kind of sense of humour, that very dry Japanese sense of humour, and it does a really good job of that. So while it definitely doesn't play like a Way of the Samurai game, it definitely feels like it has that heritage in it, at least as far as the humour goes. And then it tries to do something different, and what it does do different is really good stuff. So depending on how familiar you are with Shinto mythology and kind of really classical Japanese storytelling, you may or may not be aware of a term called Hyakki-yagyo, which translates very loosely to Night Parade of 100 Demons, and it is a real cultural point for the Japanese, the classical Japanese spirituality. There are artists that have drawn these massive kind of scrolls in which they've depicted every one of the 100 demons. When we're talking about Japanese yokai, which is what Hyakki-yagyo refers to, yokai are fascinating creatures. They're not really demons in the sense that the closer translation to demon in Japanese would be oni, and they're not really ghosts. Ghosts would be yurei. These are kind of natural spirits, and while they're not necessarily good for humans to be around, they really reflect the various facets of nature, and through that you actually get a sense for what Shinto really stands for, and the way that Shinto sees the world as a religion. And since discovering all of this stuff, I've been absolutely fascinated with the concept of the Night Parade. I've loved looking at the wall scrolls, and part of the reason that I do so is every single yokai is so vividly imaginative in creation. The designs are completely different to one another, and Parade, I guess, in the West has implications of some kind of uniformity where you've got, groups of people doing the same dance steps, or it's all very ordered and organized. But when it comes to yokai, there is no order, there is no organization, it's kind of anarchy, and that's really reflected through such a varied range of monsters. And that really suits a game like Katana Kami, because you're talking about a roguelike. And part of the appeal of this game, and one of the main reasons I kept playing on, was that I would meet new monsters every couple of dungeon levels, and they would be absolutely fascinating and fun and enjoyable, and really give this game a vividness that, again, really kept me playing on. So it starts quite slowly, unfortunately. For the first couple of dungeon levels, you're really fighting natural enemies like rabid dogs and snakes, and then you graduate to skeletons of various types, skeleton archer, skeleton warrior, and so on. But about a couple of hours into the game, you start to come up against the lower level kind of yokai monsters or spirit monsters, and that's when things get really interesting and fun. And I've deliberately not shown much of that in this video clip because I want people to kind of experience this for themselves and to look forward to every new dungeon level, knowing that they'll probably come up against something new. But I have got a couple of examples in this video clip. You would have seen the kind of cat-like Neko monsters. The first time I encountered them, I had a good laugh because I hadn't seen them before, that was for sure. And I'd just been fighting, endless waves of skeletons, and then this kind of crone woman came into the picture, and I fought her, and it was still very humanoid in terms of design. But then I came up against some more creative stuff, like the golems, which are kind of creatures of stone and rather tactically dull. But the Neko monsters were the first ones that really stood out as yokai, because the boss one would summon little followers, and they'd have this really cute kind of nya sound every time they attacked you and stuff like that. And it was fun, it was appealing. That was the moment that Katana Kami really caught me on. It was a couple of hours in. Once I got through that initial slow stage where it feels a bit like a roguelike Diablo thing, just with slightly less quality controls and slightly more Japanese aesthetic. Once you move past that and got into the bit where it really started to be like the Night Parade of 100 Demons, that's when it really kind of captured my attention. And I started to get more interesting loot as well. There's so many different swords and things, katana being the word for sword, and kami being the word for spirit. These swords you start to build personality into, because you've got a lot of ability to level them up, and they all have different kind of abilities and stuff and names, and it feels very personal with the way that you start to customize your character, so it fits with the title of the game there as well. And all of this is backed by a really gorgeous kind of traditional medieval Japanese aesthetic. Outside of the dungeon crawling, the hub world that you explore is quite small, but it has a number of different factions all vying for one another's attention, and each of those factions are quite beautifully designed. The world is quite lovely in terms of its visual presentation, despite being quite simple as a top-down RPG thing. The musical soundtrack is absolutely gorgeous. It makes heavy use of Japanese traditional instruments, and it's not necessarily accessible to Western ears as a result. I would love to buy this game's soundtrack on CD, but if they were to release it in Australia, I would probably be the only one. It's not the kind of harmonies that we expect. Everything about this game is very carefully designed to feel and look very, very kind of classically Japanese. So even though the game's not without its own sense of humour, as I mentioned, and even though it's not trying to be educational, it certainly feels like a genuine cultural artifact. And that's what really helps push it forward, I guess, because the game doesn't have a particularly complex story in itself. It's basically just you set the goal of meeting the repayment requirements of the gang each couple of days, and as long as you do that, you're working towards the goal of eventually releasing the daughter, and you get to marry her and stuff like that. That's basically the limit to the plot. But within that, there's some great tensions that go on between the different factions in the game, and there's a great ambient kind of narrative to it all. You'll get these little newspaper articles that'll pop up each day that kind of tell you the situation and what's going on, the political tensions between the different factions. So while there's not a whole lot of kind of explicit storytelling that's being relayed, there is a good sense of place and space and character and tone, which does help to, again, continue to push you on. When you're not in the dungeons, you've got something to look forward to back in town. And the game's fully featured as well. I know it's at a relatively premium price for roguelikes these days, but it does have some Dark Soul elements in there where you do get to join into other people's games, or they can join you in yours, and they can choose to be hostile or friendly, and if they're hostile you have to fight them off. There are rewards for that, and there's also punishment if you attack too many people. You get a bounty on your head and all that kind of stuff. So there is that meta game in there if you want to indulge in that. And while it has issues, like you saw with that AI thing there, the enemy didn't even bother to attack me back. For the most part it plays very cleanly. I mentioned the control issues, the minor control issues at the start, but once you get the hang of it, it's all very smooth, and yeah, it's a really great game. I love it. I think if you were to pick this up, you may well be inspired to start looking into learning more about the yokai and Hyaku-Yagyo. It's a useful thing to learn, because actually a lot of Japanese RPGs owe a lot of their creative energy to these kinds of storytelling traditions and Shinto mythology. So it does help to learn this stuff, and this might be the point that you get the start, and you start to look into it from here. Anyway, that's enough of this video for me now. I've got a review going up on digitallydownloaded.net as well, so check that out. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoy my videos, and please do consider backing me on Patreon. Even $1 a month really helps me to do more of this stuff, and I certainly would like to continue creating videos. So thank you as always for listening, and we'll see you at the next one.